Welcome to Ask Dr. Change. I'm Dr. Linda Ackerman Anderson. I'm happy to have you join me today to explore how to seriously uplevel your leadership and consulting to transformational changes, all through conscious change leadership. Welcome to Season 3 of Ask Dr. Change. This is Episode 1. Today's episode is about solution design, bringing conscious awareness to this critical phase of change. Every change process has design in it. We're coming up with the solution of the issue that we're dealing with. I want to talk about so many factors influencing the design of the best solution in a way that makes it adoptable and sustainable. So the question that's come into me today is, we use a design team of content experts, but our solutions often miss the mark with our stakeholders. What are our other options? While content design is an absolutely valid approach, when we're talking about especially transformational change, it proves inadequate to be able to deliver something that's adoptable and sustainable. Why is that? I want to look at that today and give you a variety of options to consider. There are many options and guidelines for how to best design the design phase to generate your best solutions. Bringing much more conscious awareness to this is the focus of today. So consider this. How does your organization today accomplish the design phase? Who's involved? Who gives guidance on what the solution needs to produce? Do you have a design team? Who do you engage in getting input to the design? Does anyone provide parameters to ensure the best solution is produced and can be adopted and sustained? Who's looking after these issues? And what are we designing? Your change effort might be about structure, business process, IT, new policies, new work practices, efficiency measures, customer interface strategies. The list goes on and on and on. So for you in listening to this, I want you to think about how you are focusing your change efforts around designing the solution, who's doing it. So all of the typical things I just listed are very classic content-focused designs. No issue with that. However, it's logical that we would want content experts involved in design. Of course, I'm not saying no to that at all, but I want to explore various aspects as to why just having content experts in your design process may be limiting your ability to come up with the best kinds of solutions. I want to start with explaining a model that we use in our conscious change leadership approach called levels of design. Think in nested frames, or we often frequently graphically portray this as a series of rainbows with different levels within it. At the very top is the vision level of design. This is the highest aspiration for what the solution needs to achieve, its purpose, its direction. The vision level design frequently comes from your sponsors of the change effort. This is what they want to achieve with the project. So it might be a streamlined organization, efficient, resilient, safe, maximally sustainable use of resources. These are vision level words that describe the aspiration we have for the project. And they provide important guidance to the solution that ultimately gets created to achieve that vision. The next level down in the model is the strategic level of design. This isn't necessarily what we think of as a strategy, but it is a strategic guidance for what the solution needs to produce or how it needs to be organized. It's a high-level, more conceptual description of what's required and guides the specifics of how the solution will function. The strategic level of design typically comes from change leaders and content experts. Examples, we're going to consolidate businesses A and B. We want strategic business units in our structure. Perhaps we're generating a single point of contact for customers. We're going to use centralized shared services across the organization, or we're digitizing all of the organization's information. These are all strategic level design parameters. The next level down is managerial level of design. This is how the work will flow through the organization or flow through the project solution that we're coming up with. It's the sequence of work, control mechanisms, key meetings we need, major actions. Usually it's the design team that comes up with the managerial level of design. Examples: we will have an executive committee of all business unit presidents, or we will have joint strategic planning across the business, or we'll have weekly prioritization meetings of the workflow from sales to engineering to production to distribution or delivery. Those are all managerial, describing the sequence of work in the organization. And finally, at the lowest level of design, we have operational design. This logically is the details: how many people, what locations, the specific operational requirements we need to have, logistics, the tools we're going to use, the digital mechanisms and forms we're going to use. Either the design team, or sometimes when you have already implemented a structural design, the leaders in their new positions will come up with the operational design for their own functions. Sometimes that works. So examples of this: we'll have 5 customer service centers, a maximum of 7 direct reports. It's the details of where the locations and numbers of people and the how we tactically are going to operate. Now, understanding the levels of design is really important. If a design team is set free to do a design solution, they have a tendency to just jump to managerial and operational. So I ask for you to think about: do they have a vision and a strategic level guidance or direction within which to formulate the managerial and operational? That's what's important here, and it proceeds. So we go from vision to strategic, to managerial, to operational. It means the design work is a process from the more conceptual to the more detailed. There are key steps that we have to take before we jump into the final solution. And so I ask you if any of that work is getting conscious attention, and are the people who fulfill those early roles of vision, strategic, even input to managerial, are positioned to actually deliver that work right from the beginning of the design process. So knee-jerk action to jump into solution is probably a limitation, again, especially if it's transformational change. So I want to talk about a variety of influencers of coming up with good design solutions. Most sponsors will give their design team an overview of the case for change and the issue that needs to be solved. And then the project team will take it and do an analysis and further define the problem, the issue that the solution needs to absolutely address. Typically, this is all content. However, most often, this work stays within the project team and doesn't reach out into the organization that's going to be impacted by the change. I want to stress there is some important, in our approach, there's some important preliminary work to be done before we jump into solution design. And this work is a key opportunity for engaging stakeholders and end users who are directly involved or impacted by this project and by the solution. This work is to define a specific set of what we call design requirements. These are parameters and expectations for what the ideal solution needs to accomplish. They give us a template of what we're attempting to meet, match, or solve. Design requirements can be technical, structural, operational, cultural, financial, whatever relates to the issue. To engage stakeholders to come up with design requirements, which give them a voice on how to make this best work for them, they need to first fully understand the case for change. And then they get to explore and determine what input they would provide for a potential solution that would satisfy their needs. Note that this kind of engagement is not about giving them an opportunity to say, no, we don't want this. This is about an opportunity to say, given that this is what we're attempting to do, what do we need to know from your standpoint, what it has to solve or satisfy or meet for it to work effectively? There are so many benefits to engaging stakeholders and end users in your design process. There's getting input from them automatically when that input can be confirmed by leaders generates buy-in. It generates their understanding. It clarifies the ability for you to choose between option A or option B, which one better meets these design requirements, and can reduce politics and expedite decision-making. Lots of benefits to doing design requirements prior to jumping into the solution. Now, there's one other dynamic I want to explain that influences the actual design, and that's what we call boundary conditions. This is lines drawn in the sand, what's in and what's out. Design teams need to understand not only their design requirements, but what not to touch or what to respect or what to keep in place in their recommended solution. For us, one of the biggest examples of the importance of boundary conditions occurred in a project that we did with NATO, with one of their two major commands, the Allied Command Transformation. And the effort was to transform the way in which security forces were developed to respond to the changing needs of the battlefield, from force against force to really optimizing the use of just-in-time information and digital media in the field so they could respond much faster in a much broader area than just force against force. So when we reviewed this at a strategic level with the Supreme Allied Commander, what occurred was he said, okay, great, you can transform whatever you want, but don't touch the structure. It was very clear. He said, we just got this structure in place. I want this structure in place. Do whatever else you need to do, but don't touch the structure. And so really important guideline for us to understand boundary conditions. So, it's important for you to think about, do you have clear design requirements? Do you have boundary conditions? It's so that the design team has parameters. They know what the sandbox is that they're designing for. So I also want to talk about creating a full scope of design beyond just the content. So we typically think about the solution in terms of the content lens. You've heard the saying, having a solution is not the solution. Well, what this references is that there's a lot more than just the content solution that is required to ensure adoption and sustainment, because otherwise the change effort fails. It's fine to have a nice solution that sits on the shelf, but if we can't put it in place, then we fail. And so what we're after here is generating a full solution, not an incomplete solution, that has the opportunity for full alignment and adoption. We refer to this as a 4-quadrant solution. The 4-quadrant model is absolutely essential to conscious change leadership. What are the 4 quadrants? First of all, there's the content. Yes, in content solutions, we need content. So that's 1 quadrant. But there's also the mindset of the leaders and the stakeholders, how they think about making this change, wanting this change, succeeding at this change, their mindset and their reactions. There is also the behavior of the leaders and the stakeholders, what we need them to do differently. And then the 4th quadrant is the cultural implication. how we need them to relate to each other, the norms, the expectations, what their ways of working, how their ways of working will introduce and support the execution of the content solution. So we have content, mindset, behavior, and culture, all a part of a complete solution. And so for us, design is always a 4-quadrant solution. So there are huge implications of this. This is paradigm shifting. It has implications for how we staff the design team. Think about, yes, of course, we're going to have content experts on the design team, but do we also have people from the very beginning who understand the requirements of mindset, behavior, and culture for the content solution to actually take hold and sustain among the stakeholders and end users that have to live with it? So for us, a solution design is not complete without these determinations. They have major implications for the design process as well as the implementation process. So the design phase is not a standalone. There's critical input to it. A lot happens before it, a lot happens during it, and a lot happens because of it afterwards. And so you considering when you're coming up with your design solutions, are you also thinking about mindset of the leaders and the stakeholders, thinking about what you need them to do, their behavior, and thinking about the cultural implications, the norms, the values, the ways in which they relate and interact? So how will you design the process to ensure you get full adoption and sustainment around including mindset, behavior, and culture? That's a critical one. Think about a solution you have going on now. Have you paid any attention to these other quadrants? And are they defined? It's not soft. It's not touchy-feely. It's not extra. It's not a bolt-on. These are core to coming up with a solution that actually will live, especially if your change is transformational, especially then. So I also want to talk about who does the design work. Who comes up with the solutions? There are a variety of options. Some we prefer over others, but consider who is actually doing design in your experiences now. So first up, the leaders develop the solution themselves. That occurs sometimes, depends upon the magnitude or complexity of the change effort and their capacity. Another option is in-house content experts form a design team and are used. That happens frequently. Sometimes, and actually frequently if it's complex, external consultants are used to come up with a solution and bring it in to present to the leaders for approval. Another option that we like a lot is when we need external experts, we bring them in to partner with internal experts on a design team. And the underscored word here is partner, as opposed to the external experts control everything that's happening. That doesn't work because we need to honor the input and the knowledge and the history of the internal experts as well. So partnership between internal and external. We also have the option of external experts coming in and collaborating with stakeholders and end users beyond the design team to both generate design requirements, but also to do reality testing for a design. So any of these can work. You probably get the gist that some are more likely to succeed than others in terms of engagement and buy-in for the solution. What's important in any of these is to make sure that those that are doing the design have a 4-quadrant perspective. That's what's essential here. So they're generating a 4-quadrant solution. Now, there are other options also to consider for the design process, how you actually go through this with or without design requirements. And of course, we always recommend doing the preliminary work of generating design requirements, which are a natural deliverable out of any assessment or analysis phase. You're assessing and analyzing for what are the requirements we need from the solution. So assumption is we have design requirements, but any of these processes can work with extra attention without design requirements. So first up is to develop the design team, or whoever's doing design, develops multiple design scenarios. And then the leaders or the team can debate which scenario is better and then make a decision. Clearly, if you have design requirements, they make making that decision a whole lot easier, because then we're trying to match against which ones better serves the various design requirements and parameters we have. Another design process option is to develop one recommendation and present to leaders for their approval. Another option is to choose one or two recommendations and cascade them to the stakeholder groups for input and reaction, and then refine and come back to the leaders for approval. In one such case, using this approach, which was very successful at Sun Oil Company years ago, major transformation from a functional organization to a business line organization, the CEO developed a draft structure that he thought would work. And with his agreement, we took it to all management in a series of meetings, working sessions, to have them look at it, critique it, adjust it, adapt it, edit it. They came up with great additional refinements. And then we took it back to the CEO and the senior leaders for their approval. What we got out of that was buy-in. They had an opportunity to influence, still got the outcome that the CEO wanted, but the managers had an opportunity to seriously look, explore, understand, and refine. Another option is to choose one or two scenarios and pilot test them before making a decision, before refining. Now, in this case, it extends the change process because of the time for piloting. In one case, with a major utility, we had two scenarios that were really dependent upon two very different leadership styles, and they chose a year-long pilot. That was a significant pilot, but they invested the time because it was partially cultural, partially structural and business process. And so they took the time, and then one of the leadership styles, you'll probably guess which one, came out a much better solution after all of that time. So pilot testing is also an option here. No matter which process you choose, the sponsors and the leaders need to buy off on the whole process and its implications before you proceed. Now, having shared all of that information, what I want to do, as I always do, is to give you a couple of pro tips and then a personal reflection. So my pro tip for you today is to find a way to take a candid look at how you and your organization undergo the design process. Bring some consciousness to it. Bring some subtle looking at the nuances and the implications of how well design is done and the implications for stakeholder adoption and sustainment. Bringing more consciousness to it means asking a series of questions. Does the process actually allow for vision, strategic, managerial, and operational design in that sequence of the development of the details? Do you have design requirements? Do you have boundary conditions you're respecting? Most importantly, do you have a 4-quadrant scope that you're designing to match, to meet, to satisfy? And are your design teams populated with people that can actually skillfully develop a 4-quadrant solution of mindset, behavior, culture, of course, as well as content? That's really important. Reflect on the implications of who's doing the design and what that means for those that are generating the design, but also receiving the design. Which process will you use? There's huge leverage in reviewing and up-leveling how your design process takes place. So much work that happens before it that influences developing a good solution. So much work that happens during it, the levels of design. So much work that happens after it so that you achieve full adoption and sustainment over time. There's so much that we can do that can improve this really critical part of the process by being conscious and actually reviewing and up-leveling it. Now, for my personal reflection for you, what is your role in the design phase of managing a project or leading a project? Can you influence the process? Can you influence the scope? Can you influence the sequence of events of levels of design? Do you have a 4-quadrant approach to design? Are you skillful in talking about what mindset design, behavior design, cultural design impacts, the importance of those? Can you talk about it comfortably, freely with the project leaders and your teammates with it? Can you ask the questions to bring these insights into the project team? It's paradigm shifting. All of this is paradigm shifting for how we do design. So how can you ready yourself to develop the confidence to raise these issues and take a candid look at how the organization is designing so you can have greater impact on a solution that best meets the design requirements of the organization, of your stakeholders, and actually achieve a successful outcome. I hope you've gained some value from the variety of things we've talked about today, and thanks for spending some time with me today. Thanks for spending some time with me today. I hope you gained some valuable insights for your work. Please send me your questions and challenges by going to askdrchange.com.